Bryant.
And I'm Margaret Campbell.
We're coming to you today from the Giles County Courthouse. It is a beautiful courthouse. It was originally constructed in 1909. It still serves the county today for many, many purposes. However, back in 1909, this was pretty much a one-stop shop. It had everything that you needed. It had the Chancery Court, it had the Circuit Court, it had the judges, it had rooms for the juries, it had lodging quarters for hung juries in case they would need to stay overnight. It housed the Superintendent of Education. It housed the Sheriff's office. A lot of things which we've just outgrown. So we have an annex that's off the courthouse, and of course the Sheriff's Department is very separate, the Board of Education is separate. But back in 1909, this was pretty much it. Everything was here. And so much of the architecture that was created in 1909 still stands today. Currently, we're coming to you from the records room. It's also called the UDC room. It was created for a meeting place for the United Daughters of the Confederacy. Margaret, what are we looking at?
These are just some of the records that survived one of the many fires that we've had in our courthouse history. So we've had an illustrious and not so illustrious history of courthouses in Giles County. This is actually the 6th courthouse that we have in Giles County. Our first one was at the home of one of the first settlers, Lewis Kirk. Around 1811, it was a crude log house, like was built in many early settlements in southern Middle Tennessee. There was a hastily erected log house built next to it that was used as the jail. They were by no means meant to be permanent structures. They were just set there to indicate the settlement itself and its existence. It's funny, that as the town grew and became more prosperous, they decided that they wanted a prominent courthouse. But sometimes as things happen, we know the local commission sort of drug their feet a little bit on making preparations for that. One winter evening, about 1813 or 14, a mysterious fire broke out at this log courthouse, and the story's been related that many of the citizens in Pulaski showed up to help rescue anything that was of value in this log courthouse. They were pitching benches and tables out the front door, and the line formed. They noticed that it went around to the back of the courthouse, and there were several prominent citizens in the back of the courthouse, and one gentleman noticed that things were being pitched back onto the fire. When one of those citizens was asked what the reason was, he said, "Oh, we're just trying to smother the fire." So they got their wish. A new courthouse was constructed. It was a federal style courthouse, 2-story structure, brick. It was constructed around 1815 or 16. It was in a federal style, which was common to that period. It was not as large as one might think. It was 50 feet long and 40 feet wide. So it probably had rooms that measured 20 by 20 and then a central corridor that went down the center of it. But that courthouse had a very prominent visitor. General Andrew Jackson came to visit during the lifetime of that courthouse. Unfortunately, we have not had good luck with fire in courthouses. That courthouse burned in 1849, and another courthouse was constructed in 1852. It was a Greek Revival style courthouse. It was beautiful. It had a beautiful cupola on the top. It had Corinthian columns on the east and west sides of the square. Again, it burned in 1857 due to a faulty flue. We've just not had very good luck with courthouses. But they didn't waste any time replacing that one. The community had grown, the county had grown, and they wanted something prominent and significant. And this time they really went for it. One of the most preeminent architects of the period, Adolphus Hyman, who had worked in New York and New Orleans, offered up a plan for the new courthouse. His plans were accepted, and he used a lot of local craftsmen, some of whom built some other prominent homes in Giles County, Lairdland being one of them. It was a Gothic Revival style courthouse. There are several pictures of this courthouse that do exist. They're very good courthouses. One of the most prominent is one from federal occupation where troops are hanging from every crevice of the courthouse. This courthouse burned in 1859 at midnight, as the story goes. The bell in the courthouse gave out 2 or 3 plaintive chimes just as the fire reached it, and it collapsed. The upper floors of the courthouse were destroyed, but luckily the lower floors remained primarily intact, and a lot of these records are what survived. That was a very fortunate thing about that. The bell, there is significance in that. The bell, as the story goes, was a gift to the city. Thomas Martin, during the occupation of federal troops in the Civil War, gave a $3,000 ransom to save Pulaski from destruction. After Thomas's death, a relative sued the city to recover those funds and then donated the money back to the city in the form of the bell that rings in the courthouse tower. One good thing did come from that. The city decided that they needed to put together adequate fire protection, so that's exactly what they did. We sort of have a little bit in common with that story of the burning of that courthouse with the Chicago fire. It's a little bit of a stretch, but there were animals and lanterns involved. Supposedly a gentleman was keeping chickens in the basement of the courthouse at the time, and they upset a lantern which started the fire that burned the courthouse. That sort of brings us around to our current courthouse, which, you know, every small community is proud of their courthouse, but we really do have a most outstanding courthouse here in Giles County, don't we, Rebecca?
We absolutely do. I love this courthouse. It's just fantastic. We're going to walk you through some pieces and parts of the courthouse and kind of explain some of the history, how it came from 1909 to its present day status. So we're going to start talking about the 1909 courthouse. Up until 1909, actually 1907, we've had 5 courthouses. This will be number 6, hopefully the last. Because we had a history with fire, burning down our courthouses, when the new one was going to be designed, it was paramount and critical that it be a fireproof building. Fireproof really meaning fire resistant. Nothing is really fireproof in essence. However, they wanted to do everything that they possibly could when they designed this building to make it as fireproof as they possibly could. As a result, you will see a lot of details inside that other courthouses do not have. They took a lot of extra care and time and money to make sure that they did it right this time. In 1907, the last courthouse had burned down. They were hoping to use the existing footprint and the walls in the basement in the design of the new one. Inspectors came and looked at it, and they decided it was just not structurally safe. It would really ruin the integrity of the building if they constructed a new building out of the old. So the decision was made to raise it completely, even under the ground, because they had to clean out the basement. And a new courthouse building was designed by architect Benjamin Bosworth Smith. He was based out of Montgomery, Alabama. He did a lot of prominent buildings, including Union Station in Montgomery. He knew how to do things on a large, grand scale. He decided to present this as a French Renaissance building. It would have 3 stories. It would have the cupola. You'd still have the bell. However, the outside was going to have a red brick facade, much like the previous courthouse. It would continue to have columns and pilasters, and in this current case, and you'll see when you go outside, the east side and the west side have 6 Corinthian columns on either side. On the north and south side entrances, you have only pilasters. Columns, of course, provide structural support. Pilasters just look pretty. They just kind of help with the aesthetic of the building.
And you have to wonder if those Corinthian columns on the east and the west side were not kind of an homage to the building, to its predecessor.
Very possible, because it is very similar in design to the last courthouse. So he presented it. The county commission and committee, the members, they accepted the design. It was then let out for a contract that was won by George Moore and Sons out of Nashville. The only thing that ended up really changing significantly between the vision of the new courthouse and the way that it was actually executed was the exterior of the building. Originally, it was designed to have, you still had all the coins and the architraves and all that built out of limestone. However, the basic walls or outside of the exterior of the building were meant to be red brick. Again, keep fire safety in mind. At that time, the only brick that was truly fireproof or fire resistant was the yellow brick that you see now. So that's the biggest change that you see on the outside, is that it's yellow brick instead of red brick. As it turns out, I think this is gorgeous. It makes our courthouse very unique. I'm trying to remember another one that I've seen like this, and I can't recall one. So at any rate, that was really a neat design, and it's made it very unique for us. So as we move inside, again, we're remembering that we want to keep this as fireproof and fire resistant as possible. That's why in our courthouse, you will find more marble wainscoting, marble floors than you will find in many other courthouses. Marble back then wasn't cheap either. It's not cheap today, and it wasn't cheap then. But they made the commitment that they were going to make this as fireproof as they possibly could. We currently have 3 courtrooms within the courthouse. You have Chancery Court, Circuit Court, and General Sessions. All 3 of them are in use today, just as they were back in 1909. The Circuit Court is the only one that remains in as much of an original state as possible. Over the years, some of the seating has been replaced. Painting colors have changed. Some of the things have been brought up to more like the 1960s standard. If you have a chance to come and look at the circuit courtroom in the courthouse, take a look. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. It's almost like you just step back into 1909. Just absolutely fantastic. The other thing that makes this really pretty and unique is that we have a rotunda, and it goes up to the dome up on the 3rd floor. It's actually 34 feet in diameter. From the floor at the bottom of the 1st floor up to the top of the rotunda is about 64 feet. If you were to be standing outside on the cupola and on top of the clock tower, it's about 110 feet, something like that. So it really is rather expansive and grand in nature. You truly feel there's a lot of history here. There's a lot of life and activity that went on here. They originally countered it to be, they thought it was going to take about $100,000. He came in, George Moore came in with a bid of about $97,600 plus another $6,000 for light fixtures and plumbing and that type of thing. Just for the building itself. That doesn't include desks, it doesn't include shelving, it doesn't include the courtrooms themselves with judges' benches and that type of thing. So that was all it was going to be. It ended up coming in about $137,000. Now that doesn't sound like a lot to us today, but I did a quick calculator, and there's a lot of different calculators, but approximately $137,000 in 1909 would equal approximately $3.6 million in today's dollars. The thing to remember there, though, is that is just real dollars. That's not what it would take to do the level of craftsmanship that they have here. You'd be able to create a courthouse, but you would not have all of the interior and the exterior designs. It's just a fascinating building because there's so much attention to detail that still stands today. If you go into the bottom of the rotunda, you'll look up and you'll see on the balcony, as you look up to the dome, you'll see these beautiful, beautiful ladies' faces, and they're called caryatid or caryatides. There are a total of 14 of them. Caryatid was absolutely just, it was supposed to be an absolute architectural, structural support. These are just the woman's space. If you look in some of the ancient Greek and ancient Rome places, it's actually, the caryatid was a real woman, and she had the top of the column, that she was holding up the building itself. In our case, it's just the 14 caryatids that are lovingly and painstakingly detailed.
Just
They're
gorgeous.
just gorgeous, and they still stand there today. I'm just so fascinated by those. The dome itself, again, is 34 feet in diameter, and it has a beautiful stained glass window. At this point in time, it's hard to see the light shining through because there's just so much dirt that's collected up over the last 100 years that you can still see some detail, but you really don't pick out the Tennessee seal, the scales of justice, an unsheathed sword, and an open book. But that is part of the detail within there. Again, we've got marble throughout, very unusual at that time, but they wanted to make this as fireproof as they possibly could. When you're looking on the outside, you will see the red yellow brick. You'll also see limestone. I find it interesting in that limestone was used for the bottom part for the basement, which is it takes us up to 8 feet above the water table. And at that point, that's where you start the yellow brick. So in addition to the granite and the yellow brick, you keep moving up so that you look up towards the cupola, and it has 32 columns that support it. And it's really a fantastic view from up there. It is just gorgeous. Keep moving up, look a little bit further above that, and you'll see the clock tower. This is the original clock that was installed in 1909. I'll get to some of the issues they had after they finished the building in just a second. But it is still the same structure. You still have someone that goes in there and manually changes them for daylight savings time, and if something has to be changed. And then if you look at the very tip top of the courthouse, you will see an eagle and a weather vane. It's basically just a point in the direction of the wind, but it's the original one that was there. The bell is very interesting in that it is kind of the original bell. In the fire of 1907, the bell and the clockworks fell through all the way down to the first floor. Obviously, the clock was not able to be saved. It had to be redone, but the bell, even though it was damaged, it's brass. It can be recast. So they sent it to a foundry, and they actually recast it. So the bell that we hear today is the bell that you heard in 1907. It's just been recast. There was actually a plate on there, an inscription on there that describes that tells you the history of the actual bell. It was dedicated in 1880, and then it was recast in 1907. It was actually a gift from Judge Spofford, and there is a plate up there that lets people know that that's where the bell came from, which I think is very important to remember where all these things came from. It's also a good description of how tight and frugal they were with their money. They did recycle before recycling was cool, okay? No one knew about recycling back then, but they reused everything that they possibly could. What I find fascinating is that this is the Giles County Courthouse. However, it actually took people from all over the country and indeed the world to create what you see today. The bell was cast in Maryland. The light fixtures came from Pennsylvania. The master plasterers came from Ohio. They brought them down from Ohio to do the plaster. And the clock itself was manufactured and brought down from New York. One thing that I find interesting is that even though this thing was finished in 1909, they had problems. If anyone who's ever done construction, you always have a final punch list, and not everything was perfect. As it turns out, on the third floor, especially when it was cloudy outside, it was very dark, it was poorly ventilated. They had that problem. They had walls that would sweat because you have plaster, and again, even though it had a dried steam heating system, the walls would sweat, and that's obviously a problem when you're storing important records such as tax deeds and property deeds. And the clock ran slow. They absolutely brought down the gentleman that had installed it and said, "Why is our clock running slow?" And he says, "Well, I don't know. I think it was just fine. However, if someone dropped a piece of wood during construction or some wood shavings into the mechanism, that might cause it to create a problem." He did some adjustments, but to this day, it's still slow. So the gentleman that's charged with going up there, Donnie Vickers, he has to go up there, and he will occasionally put it a couple of minutes fast because he knows it's going to continue to wind back down. So he has to go up there and constantly look at it. But it truly is a fascinating thing that it's still the same clock mechanism, and the problems they had back in 1909, we still have today.
Absolutely.
There were some other details up there in the balcony next to the caryatides.
There's a pilaster that rests in between each of those caryatides, where there is our American symbol, the eagle, which is carved in just intricate detail, just gorgeous. Master craftsmen went up there and carved those in, and I think they're just fascinating.
And again, that's where you get back to what is the dollar in 1909 worth today in 2014. You're not going to get the same level of craftsmanship. There's no way that you're going to be able to get those wood carvings, the plaster carvings, all of the intricate paintwork. You'll also notice that there's a lot of wrought iron work inside and at one time outside the building. That was actually designed and created by a gentleman by the last name of Ziegler, and he came from Vienna, Austria. And he actually made camp at the corner of Rosenau Corner, which is where now Sports World used to be. So it's amazing when you think of how many people came from all over the different places in the world and within this country. I just find it a fascinating place. Additionally, outside and around surrounding the grounds, the original courthouse, the fifth courthouse, actually had a privet hedge, and they said that it looked like you plunked a French Renaissance courthouse into a French Renaissance garden. The courthouse was also surrounded by a wrought iron fence. They decided after it was built and people were using the courthouse that it looked contained. So they decided to get rid of the wrought iron fence. People didn't bring their horses to town anymore anyway, and they actually ended up using most of that fencing in the Maplewood Cemetery. There was about 250 feet left over, and the judge at the time decided that they would auction it off, so that was sold also. So again, nothing went to waste, everything was reused. Currently outside in the court and on the grounds, you'll be able to see a large map of Giles County. You can let children walk all over it. It's just kind of a neat thing to point out where you live, or you can show where your grandmother was born. So to me, it's keeping the history alive, and it's really encouraging children to know where they live and where they came from. I believe that that's it for us today. We encourage you to come back and talk with us again. We really do appreciate the opportunity to do the Moments in Time with you, and we hope you have a great day.